The Golden Age of Comic Books, month number 19. These are all the comic books on the newsstands in America with a cover date of December 1939. This ties in with the release of Action Comics number 19 featuring Superman, which just happened to be also the best-selling comic book of the month, yet again, by far. Let's look at the 38 different comics that were on the newsstands this month. This was the highest record ever, and the 1930s ended off with a bang, with a bunch of new debut series, and the superhero genre was bigger than ever. Only 33 books on the newsstand the month before, so this was a big jump of 5 new titles. And let's see what they are. Fox Comics gave us a new series, Fantastic Comics, with amazing cover art from Lou Fine. A big key issue, $595 in low grade in the Overstreet price guide. The book's not extremely scarce. 23 copies have been graded, including 2 high-grade copies. We also got Silver Street Comics number 1. This was the first comic from new publisher Lev Gleason, though they weren't called Lev Gleason yet. And this was a long-running popular series, would run until 1946. Only 19 copies graded by CGC, yet 2 high-grade copies, but a higher Overstreet price guide, $1,000 if this is a major key book. And MLJ Publications, later known as Archie Comics, gave us another new title. Top Notch Comics number 1 debuted. This one more common, 34 copies have been graded, and a lower price tag in the Overstreet price guide of $530. Also debuting this month, Champion Comics number 2 was actually the first issue from new publisher Worth Carnahan Comics. Only 11 copies graded and only 1 high-grade copy, and much cheaper in the price guide. This one potentially undervalued at only $129. And the big new series of the month was Marvel Mystery Comics number 2. This was the first issue of this title. It had originally been called Marvel Comics, and this was the first ongoing series from Timely Comics that would later change their name to Marvel Comics. And this series would run until 1949, making it one of the longest running and best-selling comics on this entire list. There are 40 copies graded of this book, and this is by far the most valuable comic book on the newsstands this month at $3,800 or $90,000 for a near mint copy. The CGC census shows 40 copies in total graded and 4 high-grade copies. What else do we notice from the chart? I'm not going to analyze all 38 titles, but let's look for things that jump out. First thing I notice is the books that have the most copies graded on the CGC census. Action Comics number 19 with a Superman cover from DC Comics is the most common book graded. 63 copies and 2 high-grade copies. $1,500 for this book. After that, we've got Detective Comics number 34 has a high 59 copies graded, including 4 high-grade copies. This is the last non-Batman cover of the Detective Comics title, but still an early 8th appearance of Batman, so still a key book and quite valuable. After that, the next most common book we have is Marvel Mystery Comics number 2, followed by Top Notch Comics number 1 from MLJ. On the other end of the spectrum, there's 4 books on this list that actually have 0 copies graded. Now, for some of them, that's simply because they have a low price tag and retailers haven't bothered to grade them. We see that with Comics on Parade number 21, 0 copies graded in any condition. And also Ace Comics number 33, because Ace Comics, you can see, is by far the cheapest title to collect from this month, and not much value there at all. In fact, only $300 even in high grade. But the other 2 books do stand out. Funny Pages Volume 3 number 10 has 0 copies graded and has a hefty price tag of $371. This is a bit of a key book, and just no copies graded at all, showing how scarce that some of these Centaur books are. And we also see that with The Funnies, number 38 from Dell Comics. Dell Comics usually are not key books, but this one is a little bit of, but still fairly affordable, $90 in low grade, but no copies graded at all. You can still see there's a bunch of books that also have only 1, 2, 3 copies. And of course, in high grade, it's still quite scarce to find any of these books with many copies. So if you take the average print run of the books on the newsstands at this month, we're at 200,000 copies each. That means there was 7.6 million comics sold this month. Out of the 7.6 million comics, only 433 of these books have survived and been graded by CGC in any condition. That includes restored, qualified, and signed copies. And scarcer yet is that only 33 of these books have survived and been graded high grade by the CGC, a 9.0 or higher. Building a complete set of all these books, you can see, would cost you about $14,000 in low grade, or $250,000 for high grade. Most of the books still being published were anthology titles. Even the superhero-related books had other genres in them. There were very few single-theme books on the newsstand. The ones that stand out are 4-Color Comics number 3, featuring Myra North, Special Nurse, and Single Series number 13, featuring Loy.Dope. Of special interest, you'll notice that DC released a Flash Comics Ashcan comic, not officially for sale on the newsstands, but this was released in prior of the release of the official Flash Comics number 1 in 1940 to secure the name rights. Let's look at the sales stats figures we have for December 1939 and see what was the best-selling comics on the newsstand. Well, as usual, Action Comics featuring Superman was by far the best-selling comic. It was actually outselling its competition almost 2-1. After that, the best-selling comic book on the newsstands was Tip Top Comics at 348,000 copies. Now, keep in mind, we do not have any documentation for sales for Timely or Centaur Comics, so we don't know how well they sold. It's possible, though, that Marvel Mystery Comics would have had high sales, but we don't know for sure. Also selling well this month, Feature Comic, 320,000 copies, and Famous Funnies, the longest running comic at this time, 327,000 copies. After that, everything else kind of drops down a bit. If we take the 3 Fox Comics titles, they average out to just under 300,000 copies each, making this quite popular. And in fact, they were likely and possibly outselling the majority of the DC titles, including Batman in Detective Comics. We don't have individual sales for DC, but it appears that it's likely that, not counting Action, that the other DCs were averaging out to about 275,000 copies each. We also see that the Western titles and the Dell comics were dropping in sales. They were getting less popular at this time. Comics on Parade at 196,000, the Dell titles averaging out at about 180,000 each, and the Western titles down to only about 155,000 copies each on average.